Today's video is brought to you in part by, and also created while using G Fuel. Still one of the most popular energy supplements on the market today. As mentioned, the script for this video, as well as its production, were done using this particular product, so I can't think of a better endorsement than that. Its effects as well as flavor are both I enjoy and have found very helpful, especially when I'm working. If any of this sounds enticing and you are interested in getting your hands on some, either to try it out and see if it's right for you or to resupply your favorite flavor and are looking for a fairly nice discount, feel free to use my code TheDsIEGE and get 20% off your next purchase, while at the same time supporting this channel and helping me to continue to create the content you've all come to enjoy. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested, and thank you in advance for any who choose to purchase using my code. I very much appreciate the support. So without further ado, on to the feature presentation.
At once I realized I was alive. Laying in the bell's shattered ceraglass, I groped the ground, warm stone, the floor of my laboratory. So, I had never left. And so, I had failed. Again. I heard a crunch alongside me. Someone stepping through the shattered glass. With great shame, I gasped and rose my head to face my daughter above me. But as I opened my eyes, it wasn't her. It was me.
I never liked to stay too long in the reliquary drive chamber, even when I was alive. I kept thinking I could see myself out the corner of my eye, grinning.
Bad comedy. Their void contamination levels are dropping. Of course. Huzzah. At least I'll be able to bury... Their contamination levels haven't dropped. They've... alchemized. You were dead.
Hey, lose your light? Here, you can take mine. Thanks, kiddo. I think I will.
Hey all, Siege here, and today I want to dig into the story of the Cavia in depth, as this secondary narrative presented during the Whispers in the Walls is only fleshed out appropriately provided one has a substantial dedication to ranking up the Syndicate, but if you do, in my opinion at least, offers a story that seems largely unfinished, although stable at least for now. Many of the elements we're left with, specifically in regards to the motivations of these creatures after the fallout of the initial story, point to an increasingly grim future. The Cavia, initially introduced as nothing more than animal specimens akin to something one might see in a scientific lab, appropriately labeled and more categorized than named, carry with them a secret found when digging deeper into the update, and it's going to make you want to stay on as good of terms as you can with them. These three creatures we interact with, while initially acclimating ourselves to the environment of the Necrolysk's underbelly, appear at first to be of no special significance until they begin to speak, and in terms we've both heard and seen before. The Norg, a rare species of fish from the plains of Eidolon, is shown to be fully alert with exceptional brain function. The Avian to be overstimulated while still being revived in some capacity, and finally, the Cervulite, a kind of ram-looking quadruped showing signs of extreme depression, being the last of its kind. Cavia, as many of you know, is just another word for guinea pigs, in this case akin to its lab rat connotation, and it's important to note that Entrati himself named them in this manner, thus showing his willing removal of the idea that these are living beings, even more so with the Cervulite pair.
I employed a variety of cavia in an attempt to unmake the adversary. The principle was straightforward enough. though in hindsight I abhor my naivete. My humanity had been unscrolled by the caustic void, and now smirked back at me across the divide, privy to all my unfettered malice and pettiness. In answer, I resolved to hurl into the void minds that were not human. Let it parody them. The proximity of the bestial would force a humbling devolution. Or so I thought.
Their species' entire existence, in his mind, is worth testing his theory for. And Entradi's lost notes explain that the 3 isolated creatures here are, unfortunately, the only 3 to survive the experiments Entradi began conducting shortly after his encounter with the Void and ensuing dedication to defeating it. In fact, as Entradi puts it,
the majority of the Cavia merely died. I gave the Void living beings, and it sent me back bedraggled cadavers. The dead lay stacked in pyramids around my deserted lab. I was nothing but a failed priest. But a glass splinter of stubbornness still stuck in me, and so I persisted. The correct combination of creatures would work.
it's implied a number of some significance of these Cavia were sent into the Void, only to be returned as mere corpses, based upon his simple theory, that by providing the indifference with less evolved beings, it would in fact be reduced in mental capacity. Before believing, he finally came to a kind of epiphany regarding the nature of the type of sacrifice the Void desired.
I realized my error as I sweated by visionary Nestorwood cinders beside Lloyd, who curled pale and sick from chewing too much of the root. The catalyst was uniqueness. That attribute was what caught the interest of the bland and undifferentiated Void. It was not necessary to explore queasy debates about the Oro. Animal minds simply lacked the full distinction of a singular persona. My Kalimos, I was sure, was an exception, but I would not sacrifice that loyal being. Perhaps I should have. The sin I was to commit was worse. The very last breeding pair of Serviulites was smuggled to me, causing Lloyd no small inconvenience. A species on the brink of extinction. Here was the uniqueness the Void sought. I was certain to the pit of my entrails.
In his mind, in this secondary hypothesis, the key was uniqueness, appearing to imply that the man in the wall chose Entradi for a similar reason and altering his original theory by finding a species so rare that it would be enticed enough to copy one or both of the original, dumbing it down potentially even further by spreading itself across multiple beings, providing him the advantage he would need to overcome a demon of his own making. As we'll come to find, however, this has little effect and may end up being an even bigger problem in the future given what we've experienced. Ever the scientist, he includes,
I loaded the pair onto their Seriglass bridal barge, along with an expendable avian and a Norg for mental ballast. Fish, fowl, and beast. A facile equilibrium.
and proceeded to send them into the Void, just as he had the others, but confident the Void entity would take the bait, based on his hypothesis. What the Sanctum Anatomica offers us now is the final results of his experimentation.
They did not die, save one. They came back changed. Witnesses, pilgrims even, chanting freakish praise to the one beyond the wall. I knew then that my gambit had lost.
Speaking in Voidtongue, no less, something that had in fact, even up till that point, been supposedly a mystery to Entradi.
Master Entradi called it the Voidtongue. He feared it was meaningless, and feared more that it was not.
One may even theorize that the few identified words at the entrance to the labs under the Necrolisc were derived in part or even entirely from these creatures, perhaps identifying context clues within their speech to exact a form of designation for the language the Void appears to communicate with, and describes the reason we see them here now, versus them too becoming cadavers added to another stack.
Standard laboratory hygiene would have been to dispose of them, but some instinct stayed my hand. The Voidtongue was an enigma to me, but another, more habituated to the Void than I, might one day unravel it. Through the imposition of form upon the formless, they could perhaps glean some meaning.
This, of course, would have had to come when he was ready to see them, as he does appear to show guilt for what he did and maybe what he's done in the aggregate.
So long as I worked through scapegoats, my guilt would only deepen. I must atone for what I had done through my own blood. I assigned the Cavia to Lloyd, for I could not bear to look upon them. Not yet. Lloyd is at heart a good and kind man, better than I deserve, and completely oblivious to his own true worth.
And to his credit, in this instance, he was right. Once the curio, an amalgamation of these three animals Entrati instructs us to craft, is completed by the Tenno, it appears as if this item transmits a frequency of some sort, allowing both us and Lloyd to now understand the previously unintelligible words the Cavia were speaking. We are shown just how integral they are to Entrati's plan as well, offering the very answers we required regarding what the next step towards activation of his Kalimos sequence entailed, as well as now having specific names which they choose to be acknowledged by. The Norg, now calling himself Fibonacci, the Serviolite Tagfer, and the Avian going by the rather uninspiring Bird 3. By both knowing the unaltered grimoire was needed, as well as its current location in a place Lloyd had long forgotten about, they do in fact appear to be a necessary and calculated aspect of Entrati's plan, to, if nothing else, at least delay the Indifference's march towards it devouring what's left of his labs, and invariably finding what it appears to covet most, what it needs to be whole, its missing fingers, to, in no uncertain terms, end as he began. The severed fingers we were first introduced to during the Rising Tide, residing within reliquary drives aboard Railjacks and even the Zeraman 10-0, are in theory intricate vessel-like copies of the aforementioned severed digits, but ethereal in nature, passing through time and space and most likely utilizing that same technology in order to power and transfer spacecraft in a number of different ways we've already been shown, with the possibility of even more, or almost a certainty in the future. Originally lost during the initial encounter with Entrati, this technology now seems much more plausible based on the vast number of created and copied body parts of incredible scale being found all over the expanse of his laboratories. Once the Tenno are able to complete the grimoire and stop the Indifference from utilizing one of the humanoid vessels overlooking the lab from its assault, the Whispers in the Walls Epilogue portrays the Indifference as being in fact halted and continuing whatever its true intentions might have been at the time. And although they were already shown to be integral parts of unraveling the mystery of the Void and the Man in the Wall's intentions, the Cavia's story doesn't quite yet end. Lloyd, in fact, reassumes his role as caretaker to the area in order to provide a fixed point for both the Tenno and these creatures in what would amount to the front lines of a universal war. And in the aftermath of it all, a bit of a hierarchy between the three prematurely forms, with Fibonacci taking on a role akin to a professor's approach, with the other two being more assistants in nature, to him at least, acting quite dismissive in the process.
Yes, that's it. Gather round now. I have much to impart.
I wanted them organized. They're organizing. Void preserve us.
Now, let us review. In our time thus far, you have both done, better than expected.
Mr. Confident, isn't he? Very polished. I didn't see him helping.
Yeah, But then, there's more for us to do.
Right.
However, some of us are still allowing the past to exert undue influence upon our minds. Minds Papa gifted to us in order that we might aid in the fulfillment of his grand and masterful plan, of which our dear friend Min's unfortunate passing was a tragic component.
You okay, Mr. Fishinachi?
What? Yes. Please do not interrupt.
Well, I'm sure it'll work out wonderfully.
Mr. Tagfer? Mr. Tagfer? You look mad. Why are you mad, Mr. Tagfer? Huh? Mr. Tagfer? Why are you mad?
It's very clear that Tagfer, the Serviolite, is having the hardest time of the three, at least emotionally and with everything that's occurred.
1 minute, I existed only to eat and flee and breed. The next, I was me. But Min, did Min have time to be Min? Before she and I, we were the last. Did you know that? Without her, there's no more us. No more Tagfer and Min. No soft calls. No gentle nuzzling muzzle. No little Tagfers. No little Mins. Ever. Fibonacci says we have to trust that it's all part of Papa's plan. How? Why? And now I have a purpose. So the fish says, to help you in the ways in which I have been instructed. But all I want is to be with her. Min.
Whereas the other two are having to deal with trying to both understand their own existence, as well as their newly perceived roles in warding off the void, the loss of Min, Tagfer's former mate, has forced his grief to the center of his newly formed identity, clearly affecting him in a way the other two, even in their freshly heightened mental states, just can't yet grasp. But it does appear Fibonacci has remembered something, and Tagfer picked up on it as well. His increasingly aggressive emotional state begins to bother Bird 3 and Fibonacci to the point that they attempt to get to the bottom of his newly manic behavior.
Mr. Fishinachi? Mr. Fishinachi? Mr. Fishinachi? Mr. Fishinachi! Mr. Tagfer's been bumping his head against that pipe a lot. I mean, a lot. Mr. Fishinachi! Why is Mr. Tagfer bumping his...
I bloody know! I don't know, Bird 3. Tagfer? One couldn't help but notice your behavior taking on an idiosyncratic bent of late. Is everything quite all right? Tagfer? Tagfer?
What reason would I have to think everything isn't quite all right? Should I rephrase?
I merely wish to comfort you, to aid you, if I can, in the moment of your grief.
Another word.
Oh, I've had quite enough of this. You are not the only one here dealing with the horrors that besieged us in that accursed bell. The fears, the nightmares, the guilt.
What would any of us have to feel guilty about? Fibonacci?
In this moment, Tagfer realizes that Fibonacci knows something, most assuredly about Min, and the fact that he's willingly hiding it adds fuel to an already burning fire, as he's already been shown struggling to process the feelings he's only recently been able to express, at the moment at least dominated by the loss of his mate. This forces him to lash out, ramming his head over and over again, and I can't help but hear the similarity to another extremely important event in our own past. Is there a connection here? We'll get to that in a bit, but for now, the truth for all of them seems to be reforming bit by bit, and the feeling Tagfer had originally had is confirmed when Fibonacci reveals his feelings of guilt, something Tagfer doesn't necessarily share of the circumstances that occurred within their Seriglass Bell, their memories seeming to fill in as the effects upon them begin to finally fully dissipate, and only Lloyd remains ignorant of what occurred.
Stop him! Stop him! Anyone! He's lost his mind! My God! Oh, by the void! He's killed me!
Stop! Stop!
I'm leaking! I'm leaking!
You're fine. What in blazes?
What the hell do you care? You put us in that bell. You watched as she...
I saved your lives! Do you really think Albrecht thought to freeze you? To preserve you? That was me! In the hope that we might find a cure
For void exposure.
Then that means...
The clock's still ticking. We're gonna die.
I'm working on it.
I don't care. I want the fish.
What?
He did it! He killed her! He killed Min!
What? I just told you that you're going to... Hold on a minute. The specimen... Min was lost to the void.
Vented to the void! By him!
Why would...
To save himself! Or so the coward thought! Tell them! Tell them what you did! The void had penetrated the bell. It was in there with us. Before it started talking, though, it made us smart enough to understand it. And that's when Fibonacci here lost his shit. Panicked. Tried to get it out by blowing the seal. Min was closest when it popped.
After the monitors failed, Albrecht wondered how you all came to be exposed to that degree. Fibonacci?
His name isn't Fibonacci. Of the four of us, he's the only one without a name. Aren't you, mate? Weren't even part of the group. Didn't even get a label. A late addition is all he was. An afterthought. A fish. Why name something too stupid to hold a memory for longer than 15 seconds?
I want to hear what...
He's killed me! You killed us! All of us!
Papa,
Forever kissing the fist that beats you. Papa? Papa is a stinking liar. Min and I were the last Serphalites. But Albrecht didn't see our species as having worth. We were just one more component in one more experiment, and Papa didn't think much of the results. So, tag for disposal. That was us. Both of us were tag for. But I won't let her go on with that. I gave her something better. She's Min. We were never meant to be here. We only ever had each other. And now, not even that. Papa? Papa? Spineless, void-damned Albrecht. I want to find him as bad as you do. And you'll know when I do. Because his head's going right in your stinking tank.
I never meant to. Lloyd. You can't imagine what it was like. To suddenly exist is horror enough, but to suddenly exist, to comprehend so much, only to be faced with extinction. I'm sorry.
Walk, 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 walk.
This scene in particular is by far my favorite part of potentially the entire update. Not only for the incredible voice acting that really brings the scene to life, but if you really think about the complexity of what occurred in that bell, these three animals, never meant for self-awareness, but all the same having the curse of knowing, being unfairly bestowed upon them. Forced to not only perceive being alive for the first time, the rush of potentially hundreds of years of evolution being thrust into their consciousness, but having to come to terms with their very first emotion.
Hey kiddo. Hey kiddo. Hey kiddo.
Fear being front and center. Add to that the idea that during extreme void exposure, this is probably the most dangerous emotion to exhibit, and you have quite the conundrum for such ill-equipped entities. I think Fibonacci, upon seeing the void for the first time, being so scared that he, perhaps telepathically, vented their container, the vessel that, if he knew how to vent it, would most assuredly also know the reason they are safely sealed within it, in a seemingly desperate attempt to expunge the indifference from it. Doesn't really seem that out of character for anyone, much less a simple, helpless fish. And none are without blame, as even though Lloyd was against the usage of the Serviolite pair, Tagfer confirms him as the person that originally put them all into the bell to begin with, and Trotty apparently needing his servant to do the heavy work here as well. And as the realizations begin to fall out, a second potentially even more damning truth finally comes to light, that the three of them are in fact still dying.
All right. Tagfer, Fibonacci.
Listen, I can work with the fish. The murmur has to be kept in check.
Tagfer,
Like it or not, the fish is more clued in to Albrecht's diseased brain than I could ever be. If I'm going to find that prick, I need the fish.
Tagfer, you won't regret this. I promise.
Goes to show, fish. You ain't as smart as you'd like. And your promises are shit. I already do.
He made you a widow, but he made me a murderer!
Hey! Hey! Hey, 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 hey! If this is smart, I want to be dumb. Yell, 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 yell! Hit and hurt and hurt! We lost it all. We lost green and run and food want and smell follow and sky blue and min. And all we got for all that losing are these big brains. Big brains in each other. And you want to lose that too. Brains by being dumb and each other by throwing us away. We're all we got. Nobody knows what it's like being us. Nobody but us. You're not mad at each other. You're mad at you. You can't hurt everything that hurt you. Sometimes things just hurt. Sometimes things not wrong. Sometimes things just are. We're all we have left. And you want that to die too. And knock it off!
The sea rises. The light fails. Lovers cling to each other and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us. And the light goes out.
What's that?
Something from Albrecht's library.
No. I mean, what's that? You don't look right. Shit. Neither do I. Lloyd?
Your color. The void sickness is advancing. Remaking you the way the murmur remakes everything.
Lloyd?
I'm close to a means to reverse the process. I think.
You think?
I need to return to my instruments. Forgive me.
Bird 3. Bird? Hey. Bird?
We come to find Lloyd is hard at work trying to formulate a cure for creatures he's clearly come to care about. Whether this has to do with the guilt of his past, or being able to finally understand them, unfortunately he's not confident this treatment can be created in time. Further, it starts to show that Tagfer has pretty much abandoned any loyalty he potentially had to Albrecht, appearing to be fully consumed by his anger, yet curiously harnessing it and focusing solely on finding whatever's necessary, secrets, clues, anything that will help him get closer to Entrati, in the flesh. Something that's heavily reinforced when heading into the Netracells.
Settling the score with Albrecht won't bring Min back. I'm not stupid. You gotta understand, I'm not doing it for me, or her, or Lloyd, or any of us. I'm doing it because it needs doing. Turns out Papa has a whole family upstairs. Daughter, grandkids. None of them have any idea about any of this. If he was hiding them in the here and now, what was he hiding back in 1999?
But even his rage and determination, which completely overshadowed any fear he might have had regarding his own demise, begins to fade, especially after the words of Bird 3 appear to penetrate his thought process. Fibonacci then recites a portion of For Nothing Is Fixed, a very fitting poem by James Baldwin. The poem, in its entirety, reads, For nothing is fixed. Forever, forever, and forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them, because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises.
The light fails. Lovers cling to each other and children cling to us. the moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us.
And the light goes out. And it perfectly encapsulates the idea that if, in fact, Euleria and the family above is to be kept ignorant of what's below, and if Entrati was, in fact, successful in severing whatever method he had to return to this timeline, well, the four of them, they are all they have now, and evermore. A thought not lost on Lloyd, above all. It's obvious he's approaching a frantic state in his search for a remedy. If he loses them, he loses everything. And although he is successful in a formulation...
Lloyd! Lloyd is prepared for us to undergo treatment. As we are the only creatures to have fallen afoul of this particular affliction, it will be quite an achievement should we survive. Perhaps you'd join us for the big event. You never know. It may actually work. And if not, be a love and ensure the silly old thing doesn't flagellate himself for the failure. You know how he is.
There isn't much confidence in it, especially with exposure symptoms beginning to be visually apparent amongst the three.
The chamber is sealed. Prepare for saturation. I've done all I can. Increasing saturation! Their levels of decay aren't shifting. Pushing to maximum! I'm sorry. I tried. I daren't open the chamber. The radiation in you. I don't know what.
Is there nothing?
We're done, Fish. No point in howling about it.
Just gonna sit down. Will we be like men now?
We'll all get to meet her, Bird. Don't you worry about nothing. You can talk her ear off, and she'll love you for it. Bird? Bird?
Tagfa.
It's not your fault, Fib. We just played the hand we were dealt as best we could. Not your fault. None of our fault. Fib? So long, Fish. Lloyd, you did good.
Bad comedy. Their void contamination levels are dropping. Of course. Huzzah. At least I'll be able to bury... Their contamination levels haven't dropped. They've... alchemized. You were dead.
I guess it didn't take. There's definitely some weird crap going on with us right now. You want to explain this? We're...
incandescent. Some kind of chromatic volatility. A side effect of void and anti-void and something I can't quite identify. A reaction that saved your lives, but did that.
I look ridiculous.
We look beautiful.
We look purple.
Not me. I want to be yellow.
Good grief.
How did he do that?
I wanna be red.
Whoa.
Amazing. Amazing.
I'm still purple.
Everything's green, so everything's clean. Let's get you out of there.
Everything is not green. Void. I'm green. I'm green.
It's tough to overstate what appears to have just occurred, but as Bird 3 confirms shortly after...
Listen, I only been thinking for a little while, and I think I might have been dead there for a bit, so maybe I'm not doing it right, but I know I'd have been dead for more than a bit if it wasn't for you. So anytime you want to go in that chamber and get irradiated and then killed and then come back as a rainbow like we did, I'll ask Mr. Lloyd to put it back together, and I'll be the one pulling the lever on you. That's what they call returning a favor. I think. Anything for you, pal. You're a regular Bird 4.
They died. Well, a version of them died. However, eternalism being what it is here, another choice was made, with their deaths supposedly just not taking. It's unclear if Lloyd is paying attention here, but a very familiar knocking can be heard as they miraculously resurrect.
Their contamination levels haven't dropped. They've alchemized.
As they miraculously resurrect, now incandescent and further purple in hue, as well as being apparently fully healthy. The color purple itself is one typically associated with spirituality, and the greater idea of the void outside of Warframe. The realm just beyond our own, if you will, with dark energy typically being shown in this shade, and theoretically, it appears as though the three of them were yet again acted upon by the void, saving their lives in the process. In their excitement, the Cavia are also able to change their color at will, most likely to mimic whatever they were feeling at the time. Bird 3 is able to do this first, choosing yellow, a color typically associated with warmth and vitality. However, much like life itself, can also fall victim to chaos or worse, cowardice, something many times a direct result of sheer innocent exploration. Hagfer, on the other hand, is very clear in his associated color, red, which, while many times is depicted as passion and love, can also too often become violence, rage, and even war, but probably most commonly, danger. And in many ways, that's exactly the persona given regarding Hagfer. Deeply in love with his lost mate, the only casualty amongst the four of them in Entradi's experiment, angry and vengeful at the reality of both living without her, as well as having to live with the ones who, in reality, killed her. Whereas the gravity of their solitude combined with Fibonacci's innocence in the situation, him being more ignorant of all the consequences of his supposed actions versus being malicious in any way, are able to quell his desire for vengeance in a kind of truce. He has not forgotten his own malice towards dear Papa. Insisted upon bringing him to some form of justice once we are able to finally find him. And lastly, we have Fibonacci, choosing or potentially having chosen for him the color of green. Was he merely mimicking what Lloyd had previously said?
Everything's green, so everything's clean.
The light is green, crap is clean.
Manifesting the color as he thought, or did he legitimately want to be green? It's tough to say here. Green is typically associated with health and nature, but if he did not choose it, it could also mean there's a level of jealousy embedded with his supposed joy, being green with envy. Something that would go with his character, him being the only one not given a name, and instead giving himself one in the process. It makes me wonder if the narrative's still building within the Sanctum Anatomica, the shifting sands of the void greedily waiting to finish devouring the rest of What Entradi assumedly built will be expounded upon in the very near future. It's impossible to discount the obvious rap-tap-tap heard at the moment of their supposed passing, almost assuredly insinuating that it was the indifference and not Lloyd's work that brought them back. So the obvious question is, why? If these creatures were put here by Entradi as a method by which to communicate and potentially even decipher the Voidtongue, why would the Void see fit to bring them back? Well, one passage within Entradi's notes might hold the key discussing the Cavia's behavior just after their initial encounter within the bell.
They came back changed. Witnesses, pilgrims even, chanting freakish praise to the one beyond the wall.
Now, how did Entradi know what they were saying in order to discern praise if, in fact, he doesn't understand Voidtongue? That will be for another video, as it has potentially incredible implications, but the fact that they were expressing praise for the man on the wall means they don't necessarily hold ill will toward him. And in fact, I would say all of us, the Tenno, the Cavia, Lloyd, and even the Indifference want the same thing: to find Albrecht Entradi. What happens next depends on the perspective of the individual, I would think. In Tagfer's case, the idea of helping the Indifference doesn't seem that far-fetched, and he's continually shown to be sympathetic in that regard.
Whatever Papa touched, the indifference, the murmur, I think it's lonely. It wants to be a part of what we've got going on. Only it doesn't know that. And it does its best to join in, but it's clumsy, ignorant. So everything about it is skewed, half-assed. You follow?
It's interesting it was he who just happened to have the exact item we needed to enable the Palm 2, a key glyph to head into an area supposedly locked away. How did he get that? One can certainly speculate. What's not up for debate is the fact that they were both visited and talked to by the man on the wall. As of now, we only know of a few beings this has happened to, and every one of them seems to have been altered substantially by the experience. What long-term effects will this have upon the Cavia? And further, will this act eventually show an epiphany-type moment in the way the Tenno did regarding what actually happened when they met the Indifference? Whereas we know the Void made them smart enough to understand him, they have yet to divulge the specifics of that conversation. Remember, it took until the New War for the Tenno to finally remember the moments surrounding their deal. So is it that far of a stretch to consider that at the moment of their supposed death, they too weren't offered a deal that they might not even know the particulars of? Sound familiar? I even think one could in fact make the argument that the Indifference had a hand in the curious sands that seem to attempt to continually veil us from seeing the imagery within each of the Syndicate cutscenes, forcing us to annoyingly wipe the screen in order to continue to watch. The very beginning of Whispers in the Walls, coincidentally, has another brief moment of relevance here, where it's assumed the Indifference is speaking in its typical Voidtongue. With the sands shown there, shifting with its voice, and even Tagfer remarks on the odd nature of it.
I've kicked dirt, galloped through sand, but that out there, it isn't of nature. It's just nothing. It's not natural. Sometimes it looks like Papa's vessel is sinking in, like, quicksand, but it doesn't move.
It's very interesting to me that within an upcoming update, the Tenno can show affection to the Cavia when they visit, and I made mention early in the video that we should probably offer these three, especially Tagfer, as much attention as possible, because it very much seems as though his loyalties, and potentially the three of them, are right on the edge to begin with. More than that, shouldn't we also consider that one or all three of them, much like Entradi, and you could even argue the Tenno as well, will never quite be sure if the man on the wall is another being or themselves? A concept Entradi originally introduced was that he never was fully aware of who left his encounter, very much questioning who's really in control of his form. The Tenno have already shown to embody this very same problem. And as time pushes on, more and more characters are beginning to come forward.
When the grandchildren were still very small, Kalimos fell sick. I did what I could, but there seemed to be no hope. Albrecht took Kalimos away, out of our sight. He told us she was recovering, and mustn't be disturbed. And one bright morning, Kalimos came running up to greet us. All better. I often wondered if he simply cloned her, and the original had died. If he did, he never gave any sign of it. So far as Albrecht was concerned, Kalimos was Kalimos. I'm glad the Cavia made it, Tenno. I couldn't help Kalimos, but we saved them, didn't we?
Appearing to disprove some of Entradi's theories in the process. Is uniqueness really the quantifying factor? Surely Albrecht Entradi, Tagfer, Katir, and even Rel can be considered exceptional, but Fibonacci? Bird 3? How about Archimedes and Yonta? What makes them unique? How about the other children of the Zariman? Are they all special for different reasons, or as a group? Really, of those who have come into contact with the Void entity, it's a bit of a toss-up in the end, and the Tenno and the Lotus might even be outliers, as up until now, we've only been shown the Void as the reason we are special. The Lotus, well, her story is still one that is yet to be fully told, with significant aspects of it being left out still to this day. If she was created solely as a spy by two sentients, why does she have so many significant powers? Powers that seem to grow substantially around the time she informed us of her encounter. Is she unique? Absolutely, but why is the question? The point to all of this is, 1, providing the indifference with additional minds doesn't seem to do anything as far as dumbing the entity down. So Entradi's first hypothesis is in fact confirmed to be incorrect, as even he surmised. However, it does appear as if his second theory is in fact incorrect as well, at least by scientific standards, as it doesn't seem to have a high rate of being recreated, if we look at all whom we can confirm have been visited by the Void. And Entradi's first trip to the Void was largely an accident, so the Void may not have chosen him at all, rather taking the first thing it experienced, and through potentially the very first act of conceptual embodiment, created what we know to be the Void entity. One that seemingly now chooses who it wants to copy as well, even reinforcing the idea behind the Orokin as a society being downright hostile to twins. Seeing oneself in another appears to be incredibly frowned upon, and while we were originally led to believe the Void never visited anyone but him, we come to find that it's most likely because he doesn't appear to those he wants to make a bargain with as Albrecht Entradi, rather appearing as a copy of the target instead. And should it not make us question every character we meet moving forward? Are these Cavia, the ones we interact with post-mortem, if you really think about it, the same ones that originally died, or are they now something else? And with that in mind, can they be fully trusted to not be doing the bidding of the man on the wall instead? Can we even fully say the same of the Entradi we currently follow now? The indifference doesn't really seem that upset over anything that occurred during the Whispers in the Walls. More acting like a father that needs to set his child on the right path, and I can't help but feel like the events of Whispers in the Walls, while keeping him from overtaking the labs in their entirety, did unfortunately allow for the potentiality of agents of a sort to be installed. A kind of Trojan horse. Potentially at least. So, do you see why it's so important to show these things some love? As prophesized, the multitude does still appear to be unfolding, and the pace of it seems to be quickening as well. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video and it got you thinking about the true intentions of the animals within the walls of the sanctum, and further, a real reason behind needing something as mundane as a mechanic to pet these creatures, aside from it being a fun little addition to the game, if you want to go full conspiracy theory. Keeping them happy might be the most important action, narratively at least, so don't neglect your new friends. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.